This is BBC One. Now at 10 o'clock, the BBC News with Michelle Hussein.
Tonight at 10, a 17-year-old from West Yorkshire is thought to have died carrying out a suicide attack for Islamic State in Iraq. Talha Asmal is believed to be the youngest British suicide bomber joining IS after leaving the UK in March.
I think the community will react with horror that, somebody from our community has ended up in this situation, being groomed to such an extent that they've taken their own life and other people's lives.
The teenager's family say that he was radicalised over the internet and that they are heartbroken. Also tonight, we have recontact. The Philae comet lander has woken up and sent a message back to Earth 7 months after it lost power. Zoo animals loose on the streets of the Georgian capital Tbilisi after devastating floods. At least 12 people have died.
This may well run for Wayne Rooney!
And 6 wins out of 6 in England's Euro qualifiers. Good evening. A 17-year-old who left the UK in March to fight alongside Islamic State extremists is thought to have become the youngest known British suicide bomber. Talha Asmal from Dewsbury in West Yorkshire is reported to have blown himself up in Iraq. His family have said they're utterly devastated and that he was radicalised online. From Baghdad, our World Affairs correspondent Orla Guerin reports.
Smiling before setting out to kill. This may be one of the last pictures of Talha Asmal, the A-level student turned suicide bomber. Here he's said to be posing with 3 other attackers beside their bomb-laden cars. For his family, the horror of recognition when these images emerged on social media accounts linked to Islamic State. He's said to have carried out his attack here, near the Beji oil refinery in northern Iraq. It's been a battleground between the Iraqi army and Islamic State for more than a year. The teenager's family released a powerful and poignant statement, saying he was exploited by persons unknown, hiding behind the anonymity of the World Wide Web. They targeted and befriended Talha, a deliberate and calculated grooming of him. The family, who are British Muslims, denounced the actions of Islamic State. Not and never in our name, they said. And in their hometown, Dewsbury, more condemnation from a community leader.
It's not Islam, certainly not something that Islam supports. It condemns the actions of organisations like ISIS, and we're hoping that they would learn and they'd come back and realise the mistakes that they've made.
Talha Asmal left home with his 17-year-old friend, Hassan Munshi, on the left. His fate is unknown, but experts say Islamic State is oversubscribed with suicide bombers.
There is some actual competition to be the person that gets to carry out the suicide operation because of the way that Islamic State indoctrinates these individuals. They really believe, in certain cases at least, that this is the best thing that they can possibly do.
Eerie night vision pictures appear to show Talha and his fellow bombers embracing before their mission. They weren't the only ones on the move under cover of darkness. Here in Baghdad tonight, the security forces have released few details about a wave of suicide attacks this weekend. A spokesman told us there were 17 in all. He said police near the Beji refinery had killed 5 attackers, but he said there was no confirmation of their nationalities or identities. The focus here is on the fact that they were killed. But in Britain, many troubling questions. How did this teenager, described as loving and affable, become a suicide bomber? And how many more may want to follow him? Orla Guerin, BBC News, Baghdad.
Well, with me now is our Home Affairs correspondent Tom Simons. How worrying will this news be for the security services here, Tom?
Well, in general, the numbers are worrying. They estimate that about 700 people, extremists, have travelled to Syria and Iraq. They think about half of them have come back, and of course there's a risk there that they could try and mount some sort of attack here. They have no intelligence on about a third of them, which is a worry in itself. And the BBC estimates that at least 35, possibly 50 extremists are still in Iraq and Syria, presumably planning to take part in the activities of Islamic State there. Now, the government stresses it's doing what it can. It stresses its new powers for passports to be seized from extremists as they return to the UK, and the huge training programme it says it has, which is trying to get public sector workers to be able to spot the signs of extremism. But it all really demonstrates how difficult it is to counteract a culture where people literally want to give their lives for this cause. And you can be sure that police have said very recently that this is a growing problem still.
Tom Simons, thank you very much. The first spacecraft to land on a comet has renewed contact with Earth after 7 months in hibernation. The Philae lander woke up this morning and briefly transmitted information after its solar panels started generating energy as the comet got closer to the sun. Our science editor David Shukman explains.
One of the most startling sights in space, the strange landscape of a comet seen from closer than ever before. And last November, a tiny lander called Philae was sent to the surface. Touching down was one of the great achievements in exploration. And the emotions at mission control were overwhelming. But then it turned out the lander had bounced into a corner that was too dark for its solar panels. Many assumed the intense cold would destroy the spacecraft, but suddenly it started communicating. A tweet from the mission team announced that against all the odds, it was alive, and scientists are thrilled.
We knew there was a chance that the strengthening sun would wake Philae up, but we didn't know for definite. But now it's just like our little lander seems to be awake, poised and ready to do some more exciting work.
This animation shows how the lander was meant to gather data on a flat surface with plenty of sunlight. Instead, it's been hibernating in a much more awkward position, but is now waking up at a really key moment. Down on the surface of the comet, the lander has actually come back to life at the most interesting possible time. Just as this alien world approaches the sun, starts heating up and forming its tail. There's suddenly far more potential for discovery than anyone expected. Jets of gas are blasting off the comet as the sun's rays become stronger, and they could be carrying something remarkable, the chemical ingredients needed for life. The lander will have a ringside seat to spot them. What does this now enable? I spoke to the European Space Agency's chief science advisor.
The location where Philae is should get more active, and more material will come up from underneath the surface of the comet and flow past the lander. And that will enable us to get an even better view of what this comet's really made of on the inside.
All the time, the Rosetta spacecraft has been orbiting around the comet as it hurtles through space. Now the lander down on it is working again as well. So after centuries in which comets were either fascinating or even frightening, we might now discover if they helped to get life started. David Shukman, BBC News.
A court in South Africa will decide tomorrow whether the Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir should be handed over to the International Criminal Court to face charges of war crimes and genocide. An interim order prevents him from leaving South Africa, where he's been attending an African Union summit. Our correspondent Nomsa Maseko joins us now from Johannesburg. What's likely to happen, Nomsa?
Well, at the moment, it seems unlikely that South Africa will be prepared to arrest Omar al-Bashir and hand him over to the International Criminal Court, even though South Africa is obliged to do so because it is a member of the ICC. So what we are expecting tomorrow is that the South African lawyers representing the government will argue that they cannot arrest Omar al-Bashir because he is in the country at the invitation of the African Union and was not invited here by the South African government. And that is where this diplomatic dilemma comes in, because South Africa is arguing that because the AU summit is happening here, it means that Mr. Omar al-Bashir has diplomatic immunity and therefore cannot be arrested. So that is what we are expecting to see in court tomorrow. But one more argument is that if Omar al-Bashir leaves the country before the court rules that whether or not he can leave or he should be arrested and handed over to the ICC, someone needs to be held in contempt of court. The question is, who will that person be?
Nomsa Maseko in Johannesburg. Thank you. Spies working for British intelligence have had to be removed from some assignments abroad after it was claimed that Russia and China decoded documents stolen by the whistleblower Edward Snowden. The Sunday Times reported that agents have had to be pulled out of hostile countries after the files were accessed. Our security correspondent Gordon Carrera reports.
Edward Snowden fled America with countless secret files. Today there are claims that all those files are now in Russian and Chinese hands, and that British undercover agents have had to be moved. The government refused to comment on that, instead simply restating what it's always said.
Edward Snowden has caused immense damage to the safety and security of the West and our ability to protect our citizens from the full range of threats and risks that they face.
2 years ago, Edward Snowden turned up first in Hong Kong, part of China, with the secret British and American files he'd taken. From there he flew to Russia, where he claimed asylum and where he now remains. He's always said that while a few documents have been used for news stories, the rest are secure from foreign spies. But today the Sunday Times claimed that Russian and Chinese spies have been able to break the codes and access the material.
He will have been interrogated until he's blue in the face, and above all his material will have been subjected to their very best code breakers.
Over at MI6, they're not confirming or commenting on this story in any way. My understanding, though, is that since Edward Snowden fled 2 years ago, British intelligence has been working under the assumption that the Russians and Chinese might have access to all the files, and that has led, as a precaution, to some undercover operatives being moved. What's being claimed today, though, and not confirmed by anyone in government, is that the Russians and Chinese definitely have access to all the material. Edward Snowden's supporters have argued he's a whistleblower on surveillance and that governments have tried to discredit him.
The US government may have called Edward Snowden a traitor, but many people in the US and all over the world think that he is a public interest whistleblower.
2 years on, amid more claims, the debate over Edward Snowden's impact shows no sign of abating. Gordon Carrera, BBC News.
Eleanor Hawkins, the British backpacker jailed and fined in Malaysia for going topless on a mountain that some consider to be sacred, has returned home. Reunited with her family in Derby today, she apologised for her actions.
I just want to say how relieved and happy I am to finally be home. I know my behaviour was foolish, and I know how much offence we all caused to the local people of Sabah. For that, I am truly sorry.
A former South African government minister has become the first senior figure there to give credence to the FBI's claim that a £6 million bribe was paid to secure the 2010 FIFA Football World Cup. Tokyo Sexwale told the BBC the allegations were worrisome. He was speaking to our Africa correspondent Andrew Harding, and there is some flash photography at the start of his report.
The 2010 FIFA World Cup.
It was the moment South Africa's dreams came true.
In South Africa.
Sepp Blatter announcing the nation had won the right to host the 2010 World Cup. But today the clouds of suspicion are growing here. Leaked letters show the government approved a $10 million payment to the Caribbean soccer boss Jack Warner. The FBI insists it was a bribe in return for his vote. Warner denies that. And now, a man at the heart of South Africa's World Cup bid has made a dramatic admission.
Where are the documents? Where are the invoices? Where are the budgets? Where are the projects on the ground? If they are not there, you are going to leave the FBI interpretation intact.
It stinks, doesn't it? It looks like a bribe.
It's worse. It is worse. We want to know.
You were on the LOC at the time. Do you not know?
He denied any involvement, but urged us to look at this. South Africa's official World Cup Legacy Fund supports projects like this one here and around the continent, every penny seemingly accounted for. So, why did South Africa give $10 million to support Caribbean football and not even ask how it might be spent?
The question is going to be, what was done to make sure that your good intentions, you as the giver, have been realized? That's where it's going to unravel.
We are on course in terms of what we want to achieve.
South Africa's government continues to insist there was no bribe, that it can't be blamed if it is proved Jack Warner stole money sent to him in good faith.
Don't you think that you owe South Africans an apology for giving it unconditionally in such a reckless manner?
No, it was not reckless. I mean, it is for those who were supposed to administer it properly.
The South African government has even suggested that the bribery allegations could be part of a Western plot. But behind the scenes, the pressure is growing, nerves are fraying here as everyone waits to find out what else the FBI knows. The World Cup meant so much to so many here. Now, South Africa's reputation is on the line. Andrew Harding, BBC News, Johannesburg.
The convicted paedophile Rolf Harris has been criticised by a solicitor representing his victims after reports that he wrote a letter from prison mocking them. The letter included song lyrics in which he referred to his victims as money-grabbing wenches. The disgraced entertainer was sentenced last year to 5 years and 9 months in prison for 12 indecent assaults on 4 girls. Residents of the Georgian capital, Tbilisi, are being warned to stay indoors after scores of dangerous animals escaped from a zoo during serious flooding. At least 12 people died in the floods, which have devastated much of the city. Our Moscow correspondent Sarah Rainsford reports.
The floodwater raged through Tbilisi, described by one witness as a hellish whirlpool. The relentless rain began last night. Some had to swim for their lives as a local river burst its banks. But at least 12 people were drowned.
These losses are very hard to tolerate. I express my condolences to everyone who has lost relatives.
The dead include 3 staff at the city zoo, where the water rose right to the rooftops. Hundreds of animals were killed. But the danger didn't subside with the floodwater. Many animals survived and are on the loose. Some were easy to spot, like this bear. And so were the hippos. These vast, powerful creatures swept right to the city centre, where squares became swamps. One was captured safely with a tranquilizer, but other animals have been shot and killed. All day, rescuers have been scouring the wreckage, hunting for any people still trapped, and for any more wild animals. There are lions, tigers and wolves among those still missing. So residents have been warned to stay indoors, with a hotline to call if they do spot any of the creatures on the loose. Sarah Rainsford, BBC News,